we have been conditioned over the last few years, and understandably so, to believe two teams can win the title. The team LeBron plays for or the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
Like that's, and there have been reason for that.
Yeah, 3 years in a row.
3 years in a row. It's the first time in NBA history the same two teams played each other 3 years consecutively in the finals. And so we've overlooked the fact that just a few years ago, without another All-Star playing more than half the season, James Harden led the Rockets to the 2 seed and 56 wins in the Western Conference Finals. That the Rockets had, of every team in the league, I believe, the biggest offseason acquisition. As far as, you can say the Celtics, but the Celtics had to give up a player in Isaiah Thomas. Rockets got Chris Paul. I know it was a trade, but they didn't have to trade another superstar. And the Rockets are quietly right about the best offense in the history of the NBA. I want to say that again. Prior to last night's game dinged them a couple tenths of a point. Going into last night's game, according to Basketball Reference, they had the single best offense in the history of the league. Now, another team on that list for best offenses in the history of the league is this year's Warriors and last year's Warriors. And so we're always going to focus on the Warriors. But the Rockets right now have elite point guard play for 48 minutes a night and 2 of the best 8 players in the league on one team. Only the Warriors can say that as well, 2 of the best 8 players. So, yeah, the Rockets are legitimate contenders, and we don't talk about them because they're in Houston and because Harden has had some bad playoff moments, as had CP3. I think that's why people don't want to take them seriously yet, CC.
And who's their coach?
Mike D'Antoni.
Mike D'Antoni. They don't take because Chris Paul hadn't been successful in the postseason. Harden hadn't been successful in the postseason. And the head coach, his system hasn't been successful in the postseason. So we've looked for teams to emerge in the West, but we thought, it'd be San Antonio. We thought potentially Minnesota. They got a good young team. They added Jimmy Butler. We've been on the Clippers for the last couple years that they might emerge and be one of the top teams in the West. So that's the reasons why we haven't talked about Houston. Houston is having the most special season, so the attention would be warranted. What makes them so different? Their offense, with their coach. Their coach has always been a great offensive mind. Their offense is even more efficient than it's ever been. So that's the reason why they're starting to get the notoriety. But to me, the big difference is when they're not shooting the ball, when they're not scoring the ball, what are they doing? Well, they've added a couple players, and that being Chris Paul and P.J. Tucker. And in doing that, when they have laws offensively, they're better defensively now. So now they have the best offense in the history of the NBA. But when you have these laws, we've seen with Golden State. Golden State is better defensively, even though they get all the credit for their offense. Houston is doing the same thing. They are better defensively, especially in those critical moments. And when their offense is having a lull or they are sputtering, their defense picks them up. And that's what's led them to having the best record in the NBA.
This show started coming together over the summer when all these different trades and things were happening and there were eye-opening moves, and we started focusing on all the really big names, the Carmelo Anthony, the Kyrie Irving, the Isaiah Thomas going here, all the moving and shaking. And I think that we quietly, even though we knew that Chris Paul was going to Houston, like it was just a thing. I don't know if anyone really thought Chris Paul and James Harden were going to gel that well together. But there were all these other storylines that coming into this season we were so focused on. We got to know Lonzo, what's happening with Boston, what's happening with Cleveland. And quietly, without much pressure, Mike D'Antoni has been able to coach a team with 2 stars together, one who's played really well by himself, the way Russell Westbrook, but when you added players to Russell Westbrook's mode, it didn't work as well. But now you bring Chris Paul in, all of a sudden, he's been able to coach 2 players very successfully, and this team's playing very well.
And I give D'Antoni credit for that, but I also give Chris Paul and James Harden credit for it. Because, Chris, we talked off the air over the summer when this happened that I was like, listen, I'm a huge James Harden guy. I'm a huge Chris Paul guy. I didn't think the pairing, I thought the one team Chris Paul wouldn't be hugely additive to would be the Houston Rockets because James Harden does so many of the same things. They instantly gelled. And one thing you mentioned about D'Antoni and his playoff success it is true when you go through the history books, like look at the team's regular season, what they did in the postseason. And I know you know this, but for people out there that crushed D'Antoni, I think it's a little unfair. One year that they absolutely could have won the title. In the playoffs, Joe Johnson breaks his face, and that derails them. Another year, they absolutely could win the title. Robert Horry hip checks Steve Nash. Amari Stoudemire then gets suspended for the critical game of that series. Those 7 seconds or less Suns teams, they did not win a title because of bad coaching, at least not in my estimation. They had some bad luck, and they ran up against some really, really good teams. So I think D'Antoni's gotten an unfair rap in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he is a good offensive coach, but when you look at it, what are holes in his coaching theory? On the defensive end, he hadn't had a huge emphasis on defense. And when you get to the playoffs, you can't go up and down, up and down, up and down. Now they're relying on the three-pointer, which is different because that's the way the NBA has changed. When you get to the playoff, you got to get stops. You got to be able to stop people and turn people over. And that's that overall mentality. They've added that through free agency, which I believe makes them a special team.
Very good point. Hey, Nick, they got the win. Were you impressed with the Thunder last night?
No.
Okay.
No, I was really concerned with the Thunder last night. Like, CeCe made an interesting point off the air yesterday during the show that sometimes we focus too much on these shows on negative stuff. We, instead of building guys up, talking about some of the good stories, we talk about this guy's not any good, this guy's not any good, this team stinks. And
that being said.
so I tried to keep that in mind when we were thinking about what we were going to do today on the show, just kind of in commentary in general, because I think it's a good point. Especially early in the morning, people want to be optimistic, happy. So this morning, I knew we were going to talk about the Thunder. I was like, man, I'd like to find something to be like, yeah, but here's the thing. Man, there ain't nothing I can find aside from the fact they got that win. I understand Indiana's a good team this year. You'd say, oh, a road win in Indiana. They got this road win in Indiana because Steven Adams was awesome. Alex Sabrina's played one of the better games he's ever played.
Yes.
Like, their stars, Russ, George, Melo, combined to go 10 for 45. That's 22.2% from the field. Their 3 stars, 10 for 45. None of them had a good game. And it is a trend now. We are almost 30 games in, and these guys haven't gotten any better at playing together. It'd be one thing if it was like, okay, they're still herky-jerky, but they have moments of it. We're not even seeing stretches where it's like, oh, that's what they could be.
So is the key word there together? If you were coaching this team, would you just maybe separate them? Because together, there's no success. Could you divvy the minutes up a little bit so maybe they're not all on the court at the same time? Because clearly that's not working.
No, we talked about that yesterday. Would Melo embrace being the 6th man? Because Paul George is a superstar. Westbrook is a superstar. Between George and Westbrook last night, they had 9 turnovers. So aesthetically, not a pretty game. I don't think that would work. It's easy to say because we saw in Cleveland, Dwayne Wade, he was a starter, and J.R. Smith came in for. I don't see a player that's better to start in OKC. So you just can't. You only got 12 players. You got to put 5 out there to start the game. And the positive thing from it, Nick, is they are an elite defensive team.
Yeah,
now,
true.
We would have not even thought that these 3 players coming together, they would be elite defensively. But OKC, that's what they are this year. So that's your morning spin on it.
Yeah.
They're positive. I mean,
right.
that's the positive thing. They are great defensively. And why should you be encouraged? Because that's the hardest part of the game to play. The offense, the isolation, because that's what they do. Dribble, pick and roll, ISO, that part right there, the coach needs to change. They need a more move the ball, a more motion type of offense, or play fast. And when they play fast, Russ turns the ball over too much. So as a coach, if I was making adjustments, I would make sure that they realize they're playing great on the defensive end. They are an elite team on the defense. But what's going to be the formula offensive? And because we can't continue just to be a ISO one-on-one team.
To CeCe's point, they're top 3 defense in the NBA right now. And that is something no one saw coming. I think people thought they would struggle. I didn't know you. First of all, I didn't know you knew it, but I'm delighted you do. But no one saw them being a top 10 defensive team, much less top 3. To Jenna's point about the minutes, even if Melo has to start, which I don't think he does, but regardless, this is where Billy Donovan could stagger the substitution pattern better. If these guys are having trouble playing with all three together on the court, you could, if you staggered your substitutions, make it aside from the very beginning.
But they're not having trouble playing together. They've had 9, 10-point leads this year that they've lost the game.
Right. Because
So,
Cece, but they've lost.
Did they get the lead playing together?
No, but that's my point. Where they've struggled is at the end of games when all three are on the court.
But they got the lead with all guys on the court.
No, I don't think that's accurate. I think they got the lead when the one guy's on the bench, when it's 2 of the 3. Second and third quarter, when guys are resting. In the fourth quarter, when you're playing everybody, these guys just listen. There's 33 guys in the NBA. Show this, please. 33 guys in the NBA taking at least 15 shots a game. Who are the 34 guys? Pardon me. Who are the 3 worst? It's now the 3 worst are these guys from field goal percentage standpoint. Billy Donovan talked about it after the game. He said he doesn't think guys are forcing shots. He thinks the problem is these guys, for the first time in their career, are going 5, 6 possessions without touching the ball. Then when they do touch the ball, they're open, and it's unfamiliar to them. If you staggered their minutes a little bit better, they would go fewer possessions.
So you're going to stagger it now in the fourth quarter? Because they're leading. They had 9, 10-point leads. They lost that. So now what are you going to do in the fourth quarter? It's 12 minutes. You got 3 superstars. All you got to do is manage the last 12 minutes.
Your point there is a totally fair one, which is if my solution is stagger the minutes so it's more often than not 2 of the 3 on the court, does that mean, forget 12 minutes, the last 4 minutes of the game, one of those guys is going to be on the bench? You didn't bring them in to not have them all there at the end of the game.
Put Paul George on the bench, he leaves as a free agent. You put Melo on the bench, he's got $28 million guaranteed next year, and he's not happy.
Right. No, and Russ obviously can't be on the bench. But what I know right now is 3 of 17, 4 of 14, 3 of 14. Like, that's not...
That's shooting. That's them shooting the ball.
Right, but don't you think part of the reason they're shooting poorly is because they're not playing in rhythm, because they're not comfortable together, and that they've got to figure out a way in the meantime? Like, the season, we're 27 games in now. You don't have a ton of time to do a lot of tinkering before you...
They have not shot the ball well. And if they played up and down and took some easier shots compared to... They're taking the toughest shots, too.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.